The night of July 5, 1942. A full moon hangs over the Bay of Bisque, bright enough to paint silver lines across the dark sea below. High above it, a Vickers Wellington bomber moves through the night, its engines beating steadily, like a tense pulse in the cockpit. Squadron leader Y.B. Howell leans forward in the cockpit of his Wellington bomber, straining to see through the darkness below as his aircraft closes in on a surfaced German U-boat. He knows that somewhere down there, hidden by night and water, a German U-boat has surfaced. It is not attacking, it is breathing, recharging its batteries and preparing to hunt Allied convoys like a predator that strikes before dawn. Greswell's aircraft carries ASV Mark II radar, a device praised as a miracle of modern warfare, able under good conditions to detect a surfaced submarine from several miles away. Then the voice comes through the intercom, calm and sharp. Contact bearing 270, range 12 miles. Perfect. Greswell pulls back the throttle and begins his descent, following procedures shaped by hundreds of failed attacks. Everything works until the final 30 seconds, the moment that always decides life or death. As the Wellington reaches visual range, the U-boat crew hears the engines. The alarm sounds. In less than a minute, the steel shadow slips beneath the waves, leaving nothing behind but empty water and familiar frustration. Month after month, RAF Coastal Command aircraft find submarines on radar, rush towards them, and arrive too late. The ocean remains silent. The enemy is gone. The numbers are brutal. In 1941, RAF Coastal Command sank exactly one German U-boat in the Bay of Bisque. One. At the same time, German submarines were destroying merchant ships at a rate of 400,000 tons per month. Britain depended heavily on imported food, and by 1941, many leaders feared that continued losses at sea could lead to severe shortages. The U-boat were winning. And yet, far from the front lines, inside a small workshop at RAF Chenner in Devon, a middle-aged officer with no engineering degree sat surrounded by car headlights and aircraft landing lights, drawing strange sketches on scraps of paper. He was trying to modify what looked like a metal dustbin that could be lowered beneath an aircraft. His commanding officers thought he was wasting time. Other pilots thought he had lost his mind. Air Ministry engineers, men who truly understood physics, had already ruled the idea impossible. What Wing Commander Humphrey de Vere Lee did not know, and what no one in Coastal Command knew, was that this illegal experiment was about to change the war at sea. Within months, his invention sharply increased the number of U-boats destroyed in the Bay of Bisque and began to shift the balance of the battle. Within 2 years, U-boat commanders would refuse to surface at night, even when their batteries were dead and their crews were choking for air. In the years that followed, German sailors would give the Bay of Bisque a new name, the Valley of Death. By May 1943, after months of mounting losses, Admiral Karl Donitz was forced to temporarily withdraw much of the U-boat fleet from the North Atlantic. It all begins with a middle-aged officer, a car headlight, and an idea that every expert in Britain said could never work. To understand why Britain is losing the Battle of the Atlantic in 1942, you need to understand the U-boat's greatest advantage: darkness. German Type 7 submarines cannot win a fair fight, and their crews know it very well. On the surface, they're slow, fragile, and carry only 14 torpedoes, which means every attack must count, and every mistake is fatal. Submerged, they're nearly blind, crawling at 7 knots with limited battery power, which forces the submarine to move slowly underwater or surface again to recharge. But at night, they're lethal, because darkness removes their weaknesses and turns time, distance, and surprise into weapons that favor the hunter, not the convoy. The U-boat commander surfaces under darkness, recharges his batteries, races ahead of the convoy at 17 knots, and submerges before dawn to attack from perfect position, often choosing the weakest ship in the formation. From there, he fires torpedoes at close range, where even simple aiming is enough to cause catastrophic damage. For the first 2 years of war, RAF Coastal Command cannot touch them, and the ocean at night belongs almost entirely to the submarines. In 1940, Air Vice Marshal Frederick Bowhill became Commander-in-Chief of Coastal Command and faced an impossible problem that no amount of courage could solve. His aircraft could find submarines with radar, but radar only gives you bearing and distance, not a clear picture of what lies below. At night, when the pilot finally sees the submarine, it's already diving, its dark hull melting into black water. The attack window lasts only seconds, barely long enough for a crew to see the target and react. The time between visual acquisition and complete submergence, and in that moment, the crew must identify the target, line up the aircraft, and release weapons. No crew can close that gap, no matter how skilled or determined they are. The British try everything, driven by desperation and mounting losses. They drop flares, but the flares warn the submarine and take 18 seconds to illuminate, giving the enemy precious time to escape. They install more powerful engines, but the U-boat hear them from 2 miles away and dive even earlier. Later in the war, the Allies would introduce acoustic torpedoes, but in 1942, this technology was not yet ready for effective use. They train crews to attack faster, but physics doesn't care about training, and human reaction time cannot beat the speed of a diving submarine. Month after month, Coastal Command crews make perfect radar approaches, arrive precisely on target, and attack empty water where a submarine had been moments before. The squadron commanders file reports listing probable damage or oil slick observed, careful words that hide frustration and doubt. The Admiral, too, knows the truth. They're hitting nothing, and the U-boat fleet continues to sink ships faster than Britain can replace them. By spring 1942, the experts agreed there was no solution that fits within existing technology and doctrine. The head of Coastal Command Development Unit, the RAF's Elite Innovation Squadron, concludes that successful night attacks on surfaced submarines are technically unfeasible given current limitations. A quiet admission of defeat written in official language. Then Humphrey de Vere Lee arrives at the development unit and starts asking uncomfortable questions, not about what cannot be done, but about why everyone has accepted darkness as an unchangeable fact. Lee is 46 years old, considered unusually old for an operational flying officer in RAF Coastal Command, where most pilots are much younger. He learned to fly in the Royal Flying Corps during World War I, then spent 20 years bouncing between squadrons, never quite fitting in, never quite getting promoted. He lacks formal engineering training. He has no degree in physics or mathematics. What he has is extensive experience flying maritime patrols, gained over many years of service with Coastal Command. In January 1941, while stationed at RAF Coastal Command Development Unit, Lee sits in on a technical briefing about the night attack problem. The engineering officer explains with charts and equations why it's physically impossible to illuminate a submarine target at night without warning first. Flares descend too slowly, landing lights draw too much power, flash bombs would blind the pilot. Lee raises his hand. What if we mounted a powerful searchlight on the aircraft and turned it on at the last moment? The room goes silent. Then everyone laughs. The engineering officer patiently explains that aircraft generators cannot power a searchlight strong enough to illuminate a submarine from attack altitude. Even if they could, the weight would make the aircraft unflyable. Even if it didn't, the battery pack required would take up the entire bomb bay.
The engineering officers argued that the idea goes against accepted electrical limits of aircraft generators, weight constraints, and the reliability of airborne systems at the time. Lee nods politely. Then he goes to his workshop and starts building it anyway. He has no authorization, no budget, no team, just a growing certainty that the experts are wrong. Over the next 4 months, while officially performing his regular duties, Lee converts car headlamps, salvages aircraft landing lights, and tests increasingly powerful carbon arc searchlights mounted on retractable housings. His fellow officers think he's having a breakdown. His commanding officer threatens him with disciplinary action for wasting military resources. The breakthrough came on a routine night patrol in December 1941. Lee is flying a Wellington when his radar operator picks up a submarine contact. Lee begins his approach
with slow descent, engines throttled back, perfect course. Then, half a mile from the target, his co-pilot spots a fishing boat with its lights on. During a night patrol, Lee briefly observes how a sudden short burst of light reveals the surface of the sea before disappearing, which reinforces his belief that timing matters more than duration. In those 3 seconds, Lee sees the submarine's conning tower black against moonlit water. Then the fishing boat turns, the lights sweep away, and darkness returns. By the time Lee reaches the attack position, the submarine has dived. But Lee has seen enough. The problem isn't power or weight or electrical engineering. The problem is duration. Flares burn for 30 seconds, long enough to warn the submarine. What he needs is 3 seconds of intense light activated at the last possible moment. 3 seconds, that's all he needs. Back at base, Lee sketches his first design on a napkin. A powerful carbon arc searchlight, 24 inches in diameter, mounted in a retractable housing beneath the aircraft. The pilot keeps it off during the entire radar approach, maintaining complete silence and darkness. Then, at exactly 50 feet altitude and 50 yards from target, he flips a switch. The light erupts from beneath the aircraft, turning night into day, freezing the submarine crew in perfect illumination, giving the bombardier precisely 3 seconds to drop depth charges before the U-boat can react. Lee starts with car headlamps, modified, rewired, and mounted on wooden frames, working late into the night in a cold hangar where the smell of oil and burned insulation hangs in the air. He tests them on the runway after midnight, taxiing forward while ground crew stand at measured distances with stopwatches and notebooks. The light fades after only a few dozen feet, swallowed by darkness and mist. Too weak. He notes the results, crosses them out, and moves on. He experiments next with aircraft landing lights, brighter and hotter, scavenged from damaged planes and wired together in crude arrays. They illuminate more ground, but still not enough, still leaving the critical final seconds of an attack run in shadow. He needs something that can illuminate a target from 200 feet in total darkness, something powerful enough to erase surprise from the enemy at the last possible moment. In March 1942, Lee found it. A 24-inch naval carbon arc searchlight designed for battleships, the kind used to pick out destroyers at sea during night actions. It is enormous, heavy, and brutally bright, pulling electrical power at a level that would blow every fuse on a Wellington bomber in seconds. The RAF electrical engineers examine his proposal and shake their heads. They warn him that the aircraft generator cannot power this monster, not even for a moment, and that attempting it risks a total electrical failure in flight. On that point, they are absolutely right, and Lee knows it as well as they do. Instead of relying on a standard aircraft generator alone, Lee works with modified electrical systems and auxiliary power sources that allow the light to operate for a very short but critical moment.
He connects the batteries directly to the searchlight and installs the entire assembly in a retractable housing that drops beneath the fuselage like a bomb on a release mechanism. When deployed, it locks into place, pointing forward and slightly down, perfectly aligned with the bomber's attack path. The device adds significant weight to the aircraft and reduces its available bomb load, forcing crews to accept fewer depth charges in exchange for greater accuracy. Lee accepts the trade without hesitation, convinced that a single illuminated target is worth more than blind luck and extra explosives. His commanding officer discovered the project in May 1942. The confrontation is nuclear. Papers slam onto a desk, voices echo down the corridor, and every regulation seems to come crashing down at once. You've violated 3 separate Air Ministry directives. You've wasted ground resources. You've installed unauthorized equipment on operational aircraft. I should court-martial you. The words are precise, controlled, and deadly serious, the kind meant to end careers. Lee stands at attention, maintaining perfect military bearing, his uniform immaculate despite weeks of hands-on work. With respect, sir, I request permission to conduct one operational test. If it doesn't work, I'll personally dismantle every component at my own expense and accept any punishment you deem appropriate. He does not argue doctrine or policy. He argues for results, placing everything on a single night. The commanding officer stares at him for a full 10 seconds, weighing risk against desperation, innovation against discipline. Then, one test. You fail, you're done. Clear? Yes, sir. On the night of June 3, 1942, a Wellington bomber from No. 172 Squadron took off from RAF Chevener carrying the experimental searchlight designed by squadron leader Humphrey Diver Lee. For the crew, this mission carried unusual tension. Because the searchlight had never been tested in combat, and its success or failure would determine whether the idea would be taken seriously or quietly abandoned, his co-pilot, an Australian named Alan Triggs, has volunteered specifically to witness what he privately calls Lee's suicide mission, partly out of loyalty and partly out of curiosity. The flight plan is simple, almost brutally so. Patrol the Bay of Bisque until radar picks up a submarine, then use the unauthorized searchlight for one attack run. There will be no second pass, no backup plan, and no excuses afterward. Either the light works and changes everything, or Lee's career ends tonight in silence and paperwork. Shortly after midnight, the radar operator detected a faint contact ahead, the kind of return that could easily be dismissed as noise. Lee throttles back and begins his descent without hesitation, trusting the numbers on the screen more than his own eyes. The aircraft approaches in total darkness, engines steady, crew breathing shallowly as the sea rises beneath them. The submarine is running on the surface, recharging batteries, completely unaware that death is descending from above, carried by an aircraft it cannot hear or see. In that moment, the advantage belongs entirely to the attacker, but only if timing is perfect. Lee levels at 50 feet and lines up on the radar bearing, holding the aircraft just above the waves. At 200 yards, he can see nothing, just black water reflecting thin moonlight and broken clouds. At 100 yards, still nothing, only the steady hum of engines and the ticking seconds. His bombardier calls range over the intercom, voice calm but tight. 70 yards, 60, 50. Each number feels heavier than the last, because once the switch is thrown, there is no turning back. Lee reaches for the switch, fully aware that this single movement carries months of argument, doubt, and quiet resistance behind it. The night explodes into day.
22 million candle power of pure white light erupts from beneath Wellington, turning the Bay of Bisque into a theater stage with no shadows to hide in. There, frozen in perfect clarity, is the Italian submarine Luigi Torelli. Crew scrambling on deck in sudden panic, faces exposed, conning tower gleaming like polished steel, wake spreading white behind her. For the first time in the war, a submarine on the surface has nowhere to disappear. Lee's bombardier needs no instruction. The depth charges drop cleanly and true. 3 seconds later, the light switches off, plunging the sea back into darkness. The submarine survives, but crippled, damaged beyond escape, unable to dive, and left helpless on the surface. By morning, surface ships arrive and capture her intact, proof that the impossible has just happened. After landing, the crew reported that the searchlight had successfully illuminated the target and enabled a night attack that would otherwise have been impossible. 2 days later, Lee stands before a review board at Coastal Command headquarters. Present were his station commander, 2 Air Ministry engineers, a representative from the Admiralty, and Air Chief Marshal Philip Joubert de la Ferte, who had commanded Coastal Command since mid-1941, was also present at the meeting. The mood is hostile. The senior Air Ministry engineer opens the attack. Squadron Leader Lee, your unauthorized modification violates. Your modification violates existing Air Ministry safety regulations regarding non-standard electrical equipment installed on operational aircraft. You've bypassed safety systems, installed unapproved batteries, and created a significant fire hazard. This device should be immediately removed from service. Lee remained standing. With respect, sir, the device successfully illuminated a submarine target and enabled an attack that damaged an enemy vessel. The Admiralty representative cuts in. Damaged, not sunk. You crippled an Italian submarine that was subsequently captured by surface ships. Congratulations, you've created an 800-pound weight penalty that reduces our bomb load to achieve something our destroyers could have accomplished anyway. Because I attacked with training depth charges, Lee responds. In operational configuration, with full weapon load, the target would have been destroyed. The room erupts. 3 officers begin shouting simultaneously. The station commander demands documentation. The engineers insist on 3 months of safety testing. The Admiralty representative questions the entire premise of night attacks. Lee stands at attention, saying nothing while his career burns around him. Then Air Chief Marshal Joubert raises one hand. The room goes silent. Joubert has been Commander-in-Chief of Coastal Command for exactly 8 days. He's a pragmatist who spent the last week reviewing statistics that make him physically ill. 1 submarine sunk in the Bay of Bisque in all of 1941, while U-boats are sinking 60 Allied ships per month. Joubert looks directly at Lee. How many submarines could you sink per month if I gave you 10 aircraft equipped with this device? Lee doesn't hesitate. 5, sir, minimum. The engineer nearly chokes. That's absurd. You've conducted exactly 1 test. 6, Joubert interrupts. I'd settle for 6 submarines if you could sink 1 per week. He turns to his staff. Gentlemen, I've reviewed Squadron Leader Lee's service record. 1,500 hours of maritime patrol, 2 years in the development unit, 0 disciplinary incidents until this one. He broke regulations because regulations were stopping him from winning the war. Now you can spend 3 months testing his device while U-boats sink another 200 merchant ships, or you can install his searchlight on every available Wellington in 172 Squadron and see what happens. I choose option 2. The room erupts again, but this time Joubert lets it. After 30 seconds, he stands. Everyone goes silent. Squadron Leader Lee, you are hereby promoted to Wing Commander and assigned to command 172 Squadron. You will equip your squadron with your searchlight device and conduct operational patrols beginning no later than July 1st. You will train your pilots personally. You will submit weekly kill reports directly to my office. You will prove your device works, or you will accept full responsibility for wasting resources during wartime. Clear? Yes, sir. Dismissed. As Lee leaves the room, the Admiralty representative makes one final protest.
Sir, with respect, we're basing operational doctrine on one partially successful test of unauthorized equipment designed by an officer with no engineering qualifications. Joubert cuts him off. Do you know what our current success rate is for night attacks on submarines? 0.3%. That's not doctrine, that's statistical noise. Wing Commander Lee just gave us our first confirmed night attack in 2 years. I'll take amateur hour over expert failure any day of the week. 172 Squadron receives its first Lee Light-equipped Wellington on June 15, 1942. By July 1st, 12 aircraft carried the modification. None of the pilots believe it will work. At the first briefing, Flight Lieutenant Norman Marrington voices what everyone's thinking. So we're supposed to fly at 50 feet in darkness over open ocean and turn on a spotlight that weighs 800 pounds and might blind us if we look at it wrong. And this is somehow safer than dropping flares? Lee stands at the front of the briefing room, utterly calm. The Lee light activates for 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, you will have perfect visual on a surfaced submarine at attack distance. Your bombardier will have a clear target. The U-boat crew will be frozen in shock, unable to man deck guns or reach the hatch. You will drop your depth charges and be gone before they recover. That's the theory. Now we test it. The first kill comes faster than anyone expects. On July 5, 1942, exactly 1 month after Lee's first test, one of the early Lee Light patrols was flown by a young RAF pilot from 172 Squadron who had limited combat experience and never used the Lee Light in an operational attack before. 22 years old, flying his 8th mission with 172 Squadron, he's never used the Lee Light in combat. Shortly after midnight, his radar operator picks up a contact, U-502, a Type 7 submarine, commanded by Kapitan Leutnant Jürgen von Rosenstiel, returning from a successful patrol in the Caribbean. The submarine is running on the surface, making 17 knots, confident that darkness provides safety. Howell begins his approach exactly as Lee taught him. Throttle back, slow descent, maintain absolute radio silence. At 3 miles, he can see nothing, just darkness and moonlight reflecting on waves. At 1 mile, still nothing. At 200 yards, his navigator calls out, target should be dead ahead. Howell sees only water. At 50 yards, he flips the switch. The Lee light transforms night into noon. There, frozen in perfect illumination, is U-502. Deck crew scrambling, officers diving for the hatch, wake spreading white. Howell's bombardier doesn't need instructions. 6 depth charges drop in perfect stick, bracketing the submarine's pressure hull. 3 seconds later, the light switches off. Howell banks hard right, climbing, already turning for home. Behind him, depth charges explode close to the submarine, causing severe damage, and U-502 sinks shortly afterward, with no confirmed survivors from the crew. None survived long enough to send a distress signal. The next morning, Howell lands at Chivener and files a report that changes history. Submarine illuminated at 03:37 hours. Attacked with depth charges, target destroyed. Request permission for additional patrols. Lee reads the report 3 times, then walks to Joubert's office and places it on his desk without comment. Joubert reads it once, then picks up his phone and calls the Air Ministry. This is Joubert. I want Lee lights installed on every Wellington in Coastal Command. Not next month, now. The kills come fast after that. In the days that follow, several U-boats are detected and attacked at night, some suffering damage that forces them to abandon patrols and return to port. The attack is fast, violent, and precise, leaving the German crew with no time to react, no chance to dive, and no real understanding of what has just found them in the dark. July 13th, U-751 caught recharging on the surface, sunk in one attack. The submarine is detected, lit up, and destroyed before its commander can issue a single effective order, proving that this new weapon leaves no margin for hesitation. July 16th, U-335 destroyed in the Bay of Bisque, no survivors. Word spreads quickly among U-boat crews that the night, once their greatest ally, has turned against them, and that the darkness itself can no longer hide them from attack. By August, RAF Coastal Command was sinking more submarines in the Bay of Bisque than in the previous 12 months combined. Air crews who once returned from patrols, frustrated and empty-handed, now come back with confirmed kills and wreckage seen burning on the sea. U-boat commanders stop surfacing at night, abandoning tactics they had relied on since the start of the war. Admiral Donitz issues emergency orders. All boats will recharge batteries during daylight hours only. Night surface operations are suspended until further notice. It is a stunning reversal, forced not by a new fleet or a new doctrine, but by a single beam of light that has stripped away the advantage of surprise. But daylight operations mean RAF fighters, radar-equipped ships, convoys with air cover. The ocean, once wide and forgiving, becomes crowded with threats, and every surfaced minute feels like an invitation to disaster. The U-boat are trapped. Surface at night and face the lee light. Surface by day and face everything else. Dive and remain hidden, and batteries drain. Speed drops, and escape becomes impossible.
The submarine designed to hunt is now being hunted, boxed in by physics, technology, and time. The statistics tell the story. In the 5 months before the Lee Light became operational, after the Lee Light entered service, Coastal Command reports a noticeable increase in successful night attacks. Although these results come from the combined use of new radar, longer-range aircraft, and improved tactics, more importantly, it breaks the confidence of the U-boat arm, changes commander behavior, and shifts control of the night sky back to the Allies. The Battle of the Atlantic does not end with one invention, but from this moment on, the balance has clearly begun to turn. On the night of June 7th to 8th, 1944, Flying Officer Kenneth Owen Moore took the Lee Light technology to its ultimate expression. Moore is a 22-year-old Canadian flying a B-24 Liberator from RAF St. Avold on D-Day +1. His mission? Patrol the approaches to the English Channel and prevent U-boat from attacking the Normandy invasion fleet. At 9:17 p.m., Moore's radar detects a submarine. He approaches in total darkness, activates the ley light at 50 yards. Moore's crew attacked 2 U-boats on the night of June 7th to 8th, 1944, and the second submarine is identified with confidence as U-373, while the first is most often listed as U-629, but is sometimes debated as U-441. Moore lands at St. Avold with this entry in his combat log. Sighted 2 subs, sank the same. For this mission, Moore receives the Distinguished Service Order and the American Silver Star. His gunners and navigator receive Distinguished Flying Crosses. The Liberator receives a fresh coat of paint and a new nickname, Killer Moore. Admiral Carl Donitz later writes in his memoirs, "The introduction of the searchlight aircraft made it impossible to operate effectively at night. This single weapon, more than any other, forced us to abandon our Wolfpack tactics and cost us the Battle of the Atlantic." In 1943, a U-boat commander captured after his submarine was illuminated and destroyed by a Lee light reportedly tells his interrogators, "We called it Das Tod, the light of death. You would be running on the surface, confident in the darkness, and then God himself would flip a switch and turn you into a target. It lasted 3 seconds. That was enough." German sailors reportedly began calling the Bay of Bisque the Valley of Death. By late 1943, U-boat crews allegedly requested transfers to avoid Bay of Bisque patrols. Humphrey Deverd Lee received no public recognition during the war. His invention remained classified until 1946, buried inside technical files and operational reports that few civilians would ever see. While other wartime innovators were celebrated in newspapers and documentaries, Lee's name stayed hidden, known only inside a small circle of pilots and engineers. When the war ended, he continued serving in the RAF, moving quietly through staff positions, eventually retiring. After the war, Lee's service record lists him as a wing commander, and he later resigned his RAF commission in 1954, a rank earned through decades of steady service rather than public acclaim. He refuses every interview request, declines every invitation to speak at military conferences, and avoids any situation where attention might shift toward him. Friends later recalled that Lee seemed uncomfortable whenever the conversation turned personal, as if praise itself was something to be corrected. When the RAF Museum asks permission to display his original workshop prototype, he writes back a short reply that reflects this mindset perfectly. The device worked because good men flew it. Tell their stories, not mine. To Lee, technology never mattered without the human courage behind it. Humphrey Deavard Lee was born in 1997 and he died on June 6, 1980, and his role is remembered mainly by specialists and by the air crews who used his searchlight. His obituary in the Times runs 4 paragraphs, focusing mostly on his administrative service in the 1950s and his later staff roles. Lee Light, the invention that changed the Battle of the Atlantic, gets 1 sentence. There is no dramatic headline, no reference to the nights over Blackwater, no mention of the crews who lived because of it. In 2008, the RAF finally installed a permanent exhibition about the Lee Light at the RAF Museum in Hendon. The centerpiece is Lee's original workshop prototype, the jury-rigged searchlight built from car parts and salvaged landing lights, held together with wire, improvised brackets, and a kind of stubborn hope that official diagrams never allow. Visitors often stop in silence when they realize how crude it looks and how powerful it proved to be. Beneath it, a plaque reads, "Designed in violation of regulations, built without authorization, installed against direct orders, saved 400,000 lives." The wording is blunt, almost uncomfortable, and that is exactly the point. It forces the reader to confront the gap between procedure and survival, between rules on paper and reality in combat. The first confirmed Lee Light kill is associated with an American pilot, Y.B. Howell, and his success helped prove that the idea worked in combat, even though most of the credit still belongs to the crews who had to fly low over black water to make it real. So did 300 other pilots. We owe you everything. Around them stand men who understand exactly what those words mean. Lee smiles and shakes his head. "You owe yourselves everything," he replies. "I just gave you a better flashlight." It is not false modesty. It is how he genuinely saw the world. The lesson isn't subtle. Humphrey Deavard Lee didn't have an engineering degree, didn't have official authorization, didn't have expert consensus on his side. What he had was a problem that needed solving, a war that did not wait for permission, and the courage to ignore everyone who said it couldn't be done. The experts were wrong about electrical engineering, wrong about weight calculations, wrong about operational feasibility, and a middle-aged squadron leader with a car headlight, borrowed parts, and a stubborn belief was right. Sometimes the most important words in military history aren't "yes, sir" or "following orders." Sometimes they're simply "watch this." If you're amazed by how one man's unauthorized invention turned the Battle of the Atlantic, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We release new episodes every week, uncovering the untold stories of the officers, engineers, and ordinary soldiers whose unauthorized innovations saved millions of lives. The next story is already waiting.